wedding crashing, dumpster diving, assuming fake identities. It all sounds like the ultimate bad behavior, doesn't it? But for our next guest, it was just all in a day's work. Watch this.
Carrie Fisher battles mental illness. OJ's secret wife shares secret vow to Sonny. Who wrote these tabloid headline stories anyway? Marlise Kast did. She was so young and successful that she was known as the tabloid prodigy. Marlise, the daughter of a minister, was the least likely person to become a reporter for the Globe. Right out of college, she landed a job as a tabloid writer, playing cat and mouse with Hollywood's rich and famous. Marlise shares her outrageous but true experiences and what happened when she came face to face with her conscience.
Well, Marlise Kast is a former reporter for the Globe and the author of a new book called Tabloid Prodigy. And Marlise, we welcome you to the 700 Club. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You were pretty young when all of that started for you. How did you land that job?
I went into the business when I was 21.
Wow.
I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I felt like this was the quickest way into the job.
Were you surprised by some of the things that you were asked to do initially, or was that just very exciting to you? What went through your mind?
I was a little bit caught off guard at the beginning, realizing that I would have to pull phone scams and claim to be people that I wasn't in order to get the story. But somehow I found that I was addicted to the business. It was the adrenaline rush for me.
You said that you were given a headline and a deadline. What did you mean by that?
I was given a headline, just the assignment, a lead sheet, and I was usually given 24 hours to turn the story, and what I did in between was up to me.
So when you say a lead sheet, I often wonder when I look at stories that are headlines and things like that, did they create the story headline first and then they just followed up with information afterwards, or did you create the story? Like what were you given? Just a person when you say an assignment?
Generally, we would have sources who would call into the office and say, we have an idea that this is happening and you have to check it out and see if the story is true or not. And that's where I would come in. And my assignment would be to find out if the story was true and to usually go undercover to get the truth.
Once you get a reputation for being a tabloid prodigy, is it hard to stay at the top? And then do you feel kind of in yourself like you always have to continue to top the last thing that you did?
I felt like I was indebted to my editors for believing in me because I really didn't have any history with writing and I wanted to be a journalist and I felt like them giving me a paycheck to write was my dream. Yeah. And so I just wanted to keep turning headline after headline, and at the peak of my career I was turning between 2 and 7 stories a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the most outrageous thing you ever did to get a story?
Probably at the beginning of my career, which really solidified the position. And my editors said, we're putting you on an assignment. We really don't want you to get involved, but we want you to see how the professionals work. And it was in a wedding involving William Shatner. And so everyone was caught. Each reporter and paparazzi, they never made it through the wedding doors. And I stood up and I said, I have a plan. I'm going in. I can get into this wedding. And so I took an empty wine glass in one hand and my high heels in the other, and I pretended to be a drunk wedding guest, and I hid in the bushes outside of the property, and eventually the security saw me, and they came over and they said, what are you doing? There's paparazzi everywhere. Get back into the wedding. And they threw me into the wedding. And because of that disguise, I think I felt invincible, and I began taking on countless identities, and that was just one of hundreds.
Wow. You know, I hear so often people who are those being hunted by the media, the people who are celebrities, talking about this hate relationship that they have with people who are invading their space and their privacy and their lives. And of course, there's always the argument of, well, that's the nature of the business that you're in, you asked for it. What's the story that you did that you most regret?
I think on some level, I regret every story. I felt like I had a talent. I was good at something I wasn't supposed to be good at. And so towards the end of my career, my editor said, we want you to become Leonardo Dicaprio's neighbor. And this was right after Titanic. And so I moved in next door to him, and I ended up finding out all kinds of information about his personal life. And I ended up doing a full 8-page investigation, and as a result, the FBI came in, and they went into the hotel, and all of my sources, who I paid $5,000 each to give me the information, they had all cracked under pressure, and they all lost their jobs. Leo and all of his friends, they had to move into a new home overnight. And that was something that I had to realize I affected all of those lives with my pen. And it wasn't only the sources and the celebrities, but I think one person who was being impacted by this for years was me. And so I eventually had to step away from it and say, what am I doing? Who am I?
You came from a family of missionaries and ministers. What did your family think about your job during all of this time? Did they ever say anything to you about it?
They weren't happy. They weren't happy at all. In fact, my parents just kept praying for me. And they told me all the time, we're praying for you. We know you're going to come home. And for them, it was this idea that this is the prodigal daughter. She has to come back to where she came from. And my whole life, I was spoon-fed the truth. There was always that nugget of faith. And I knew who I was. I knew that my roots were based on Christ. But I wasn't nurturing that. And so as a result, the soil went dry.
Yeah.
And I took my own path, and I made my own decisions.
So you wound up with head knowledge, and were you kind of, in all of that, were you kind of making excuses for the choice that you'd made, or did you even look it in the face and say, what I'm doing isn't right, or what was your attitude toward it?
Deep down, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I knew that my mother always told me, Jeremiah 1:4, that God had a plan for my life. Before I was even formed in the womb, He knew what I was supposed to do. And I was taking the talent that He had given me and using it for my own glory.
So what made you one day wake up and say, I can't do this anymore?
Mm-hmm. One day, my editors gave me a photo, and it was of Madonna. And they had the headline, Madonna Fat and 40. And they wanted me to write a story to that photograph. And I could always justify on some level what I had been doing because I felt that there was a nugget of truth in everything that I was saying. But this photograph, in my opinion, had been stretched. And I said, I can't write this. This isn't true. And that was the moment I followed it in what Jeremiah 1:4 says is, I have put my words in your mouth, now you stand up. And I felt like that was the first time I stood up in boldness. And I looked my editor in the face, I said, I can't do this. And she said, you have 1 hour to do it, and if you can't do it, you can pack your bags and get out. And so I went back and I prayed and I cried and I eventually wrote a letter of resignation, and I believe that was probably the best writing I ever did for the tabloids.
Did you feel free after that?
I did.
Oh, I'll bet.
It was completely surrendering to Christ and embracing who God made me to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, God always takes our gifts and uses them for His glory. One of the first things that's come out of Marlise's life at this point with her pen is Tabloid Prodigy. It's a fascinating book about how she got into all of this and how Christ brought her out of it. And may God bless you as you move forward with your gifts and talents for Him.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.